You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market. From unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the option block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tussaw from RCM Asset Management, Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com, and Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the option block.
All right, everybody. That rockin' tune means it's time once again for a little program I like to call Around These Parts, the Option Block. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. A legion, a plethora, a gross amount of programming for your listening pleasure available on said network. Easiest place to find all that goodness, theoptionsinsider.com, or of course via iTunes or Stitchers or TuneIns or all that fun stuff. You name the app, we're probably there if it's a somehow reputable and well-known source. If it's some weird Yugoslavian podcast outlet, I can't make any promises, but hit us up and maybe we'll see what we can do for you. And of course, you can always find us via the app stores, iOS, Android, the beloved Fire OS, and of course, every Monday and Thursday, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, via the magic of Mixlr, Mixlr. So for all you people hitting us up all the time saying we wish the show was out faster, but for some reason you can't join us live, you should still grab that link, that Mixlr link that we tweet out all the time and put on Facebook and stock twits, because that's how you get the show pretty much instantly. You get the raw form before it goes out nice and pretty and beautiful and pristine on the network the following morning. So if you want it in that intermediary period, but you can't join us live, you can still grab it up there. We post the programs up there. They're up there for about a week or so, I think, before we take them down for the next stuff. Otherwise, you want it full kit and caboodle, get it on the network. If you want it instantly in your ear holes, Mixlr is the easiest place to do just that. And joining me on the old show today, let's go in order of sadness over melting ice rinks, which we'll start off, of course, with the Rock Lobster beaming in from the Grand Duchy of Maine, where he is just wiping away the tears over his melted and lost winter season. Mr. Rock Lobster, glad you can join us in this very sad time for you.
Did you see that rink picture I sent you? It's full of my tears now that the winter's over.
that's what all the water is. Huh? The water is your tears.
It will make a fine koi pond, I think. I don't even know if there are koi in Maine, but it's possible that it becomes a koi pond.
Now, if you have some more coldness in the next couple of weeks, could it freeze up again and work for you?
Yeah, it could. It could. It's holding water, so. But we need teens. We need a cup. The problem is the days are like in the 40s. It is a master of disaster for ice. You want to try to make an ice rink? Number one rule. Keep it freezing. That's all I can say.
Usually the number one rule will be move to Maine. That usually have all your bases covered there, but not anymore, sir. Look in Chicago. It's been almost 70 degrees for the past week here. It's been fantastic. No ice rinks here. Not complaining here, but then again, I didn't move to Maine for the ice and snow, so it doesn't really make me sad. Now let's move on over a little bit closer to home to that land formerly of pickles, now of water gardens or whatever heck else they're hawking out there in St. Charles these days. But we know it is indeed a temperate place, always a balmy 72 all year round. It's magical how they do that. Mr. Uncle Mike joins us from RCM Wealth Advisors. Uncle Mike, welcome to the show, and I'm sure you're sad that you guys don't have any ice rinks there because it's 72 degrees, but the flip side is it's always 72, so it's nice.
Well, we have winter here, too, when we choose to, so that's just kind of how it works here. It's that magical of a place.
So when you hit the winter button, that's when you get that one day a year. All right, everyone go sled and ski and snow ski, whatever the heck else it is that you do. If you guys follow our Twitter, I just tweeted out a picture of Rock Lobster's Pond of Tears, so you guys can enjoy it for yourselves as we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
Welcome to the Trading Block, listeners. This is indeed the portion of the show where we tell you what caught our eye in today's activity. Speaking of catching my eye, what is that in the middle of your pond of tears there, Mr. Rock Lobster? Is that a orange hockey puck or a leaf? What the heck is that? You playing hockey on that water?
What happened is there are little cones that the kids skate around the ice, to practice turns. Or actually, it's for the old daddy to practice turns. They don't even practice anymore. And then when we melted, all my cones dropped into the water, and then with the slight ice, it froze over the top. So the cones are buried for a little while longer.
So you have frozen ice cones in your sad pond of tears. Oh, the travails of Rock Lobster and his ilk over there in the land of Maine. Speaking of things that aren't heading for travails, another green day on the street. Dow was edging toward his 12th straight close. I'll let Mr. Uncle Mike let us know if it got there or not, just because he's our Mr. Record guy. He's our never better time to sell. Never hasn't said to buy too often, but never better time to sell. That's his gig, so I won't step all over his toes there. But mostly green on the street. Most of the major indices up pretty much fractionally to end the day. Not a heck of a lot of net movements on the day. And of course, VIX cash taking a little bit of that old weekend back, up about a little more than half a handle or so, right a little bit north of the 12 handle again. So we were debating this on vol views. Was it going to go a little bit higher? Was it going to go a little bit lower? The futures were aiming higher, but it was a bit of a mixed bag in terms of our prognostications. Again, we got a whole week to go, so we never know. They kind of like exit polling. You never know exactly what the number is going to be till the vote actually happens. You never know what the heck VIX cash is going to be until the actual close on Friday, or at least the close of the show on Friday, where we've seen VIX do a lot of weird things over the course of that hour, and I wouldn't put it past it to do that yet again. We got some earnings we're keeping an eye on here as well, but before I get to those, they haven't popped off yet. Let's get to the aforementioned Uncle Mike. There's some records being flirted with, or record closes being flirted with over there in Dow land. We talk Dow a lot, but every now and then it's good for a record if nothing else. And what else was catching your eye out there in today's activity, sir?
Well, we have a few things of what's happening today. I think a lot of what's going on, I think we're on the sidelines waiting for the big speech tomorrow night by President Trump. I was just talking with a client today. He had some calls that were in the money in his trading account on a call spread, not a huge position. He's saying, so we're going through like what his risk is, what his potential reward is, and what's happening. And I just said to him, I said, well, you have the Trump speech tomorrow night. And if you need 15 points of market movement, a lot of times that can happen when Trump speaks. So the fact that he's speaking to a joint session of Congress tomorrow night, one way or another, you might be wrong on this, you might be right on this, we'll see. But 15 points is not out of the question when Trump speaks, especially when he's speaking to a joint session of Congress. Some other things of note, oil closed up slightly today. I think that we might get some more insight on that on the speech tomorrow night, but we will see. You never know. Besides that, though, the only thing that's really catching my eye that showing any decent movement today would be IBB, and that would be the biotech. So we did have a little bit of movement to the upside on that. 300's been a little bit of a sticking point for it. So we'll see if maybe later this week with Trump speaking, for better or for worse, it can get through the 300 mark. Combine that with non-farms coming up this Friday, and then the Fed has their blackout period coming up on their 2-week blackout period where they aren't allowed to talk, or at least talk about rates, or I don't even know what it means, quite honestly. They just can't say anything, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they get black tape put on their lips like in some weird Pink Floyd video. Who knows? But nonetheless, they aren't able to talk, and with that, I think there's a lot of things coming up in the near future, and I think today was just kind of a wait-and-see type of day for the time being.
Uncle Mike, closet Pink Floyd fan. Who knew? Who knew, sir? The things we discover here on our bi-weekly journeys through the world of options with Uncle Mike and the Rock Lobster and occasional other special guests. Speaking of those other guests, Mr. Rock Lobster, when you're drying off your tears, sir, aside from that, the markets provide a great distraction, I find, in such troubling and such painful and mournful times. So what was distracting you today, sir?
Well, normally they do. But,
what, today's 0.1% upside close didn't blow you scared up?
No, it didn't. I think I did. Was this an all-time high close too? I think another one, just because. They did. I heard they had a press conference today before the joint session of. Is he addressing the joint session of Congress? I guess tomorrow it'll be interesting. Probably entertaining. However, as far as rally goes, we have the same kind of thing where we're starting to get close to. I think we're starting to get close to where SPX might start to pick up some volatility, where VIX might pick up some volatility from the French elections. If you notice, some of the volatility on those products is pretty high. Like I think the April V stocks. It hasn't filtered down to the euro much. It's a little higher, but not crazy. So we can cover some of those in the odd block, but there's some movement there, but right now we're not. So you're kind of at that weird, what I would just say the vol fatigue type of market where, implied volatility is probably a little higher than it should be for what is going on right now, but it's trying to price something that might happen later. It doesn't always do that, but that's what's going on now. And it's keeping volatility just kind of just levels. I know the VIX is 12, but realized vol is still like 5%. So there's not, you would think they could even take it down to 11. Every point down now for VIX is a big point down, dropping. So I don't expect it to fall apart, but it's also just going sideways. So where's the action? Yeah, I think biotech seems to be, what was ugly last year, going into the end of last year, biotech. And now you could see something on healthcare. And maybe the sound was like it was more kind of replace than repeal. So there could be dollars flowing to healthcare. I don't know. So I look at how stocks are reading the tea leaves, and when was the last time, like Michael said, the IBB was up? So Icon taking a stake in Bristol Myers. A lot of the drug stocks having a little bit of a bounce today. So I think that is, those are interesting as far as trends go, but we'll see where things go. But I do think the market is just kind of sitting around waiting for this speech, see what happens. And it could easily be, buy the rumor, sell the news type thing. So when the speech is done, we don't get a lot of action. If the speech isn't really crazy, if it's aggressive kind of pro-growth agenda, how the market takes that, we could see a little bit more rally. So I'm just looking at short term. I think short term, the volatility looked kind of inexpensive, and that was about the only thing, based on, since there is the move potential, that looked kind of interesting because that vol is down to the single digits in the SPX, as low as it got. Let's see, we're looking at this. I think I'm going to say it got probably it was at 8%, maybe 7.75% this morning in the March 06, which is that Monday right after. It's a week from now. So, it's getting down to that kind of bottomy basement number. SPX a month out or 60, a little farther out now is more like 11. So cheaper vol going out there, but we did get a little lift today. I think you got a little bit more lift than the weekend. Because there's actually a point today where VIX was almost unchanged. So I think they're just pumping a little bit of action into that speech potential. That's where I love the weeklies. I think they're great indicators for sentiment. And they're pumping some movement back in from this morning. So, and I think we'll see something tomorrow one way or another. I guess the speech is 9 p.m. Eastern time. So stay tuned is all I can say. Stay tuned
to see the whole speech just tweeted out in short 140 character form ahead of time. So we'll spoil the whole thing. So you don't need to sit up and watch the speech. Just wait for the tweets, and you'll get the concise version. Speaking of things that are actually happening today, there were a few things happening, including a few things happening now, like earnings season not quite done with us yet. There are a few names still lurking out there in the weeds, including a pretty pricey one, that is Priceline. Ticker symbol, of course, PCLN. And they were coming out after the bell. They closed right around 632 and a quarter or so, I believe. And an interesting one for them. They were pricing in, looks like about, well, first off, they were roaring to the upside. They were up about 40 handles in the after. They were trading like 1672 at one point. But they were pricing in a pretty aggressive move. They were pricing in nearly a 70 handle move, about $69 or so. And that works out to about 4%. And even with that aggressive upside move of 40 handles or so in the initial blush after earnings, that was only a few percent. It was about half of that 4% move, and actually a little less, a little more than half there. But still, not again, just keeping with the theme of underperforming grand resounding mezz here on the earnings season. So far, it looks like in the after hours now that selling off a bit, 16.5, now back up to about 16.65 or so. So getting a little bit of its tailwind back. We'll see how this holds up. Up about 2%, so roughly about half what they were pricing in. I don't know, Mr. Rock Lobster, I'm trying to think of the last time we saw this much just resounding underperformance kind of across the board. Obviously, there were outliers, the Apples, the Activision, the A-names predominantly outperforming their straddles. But aside from that, there really wasn't a heck of a lot to really get people excited about. They were pricing in a lot of vol, but we didn't really find it. Is that how you're coming away from earnings season this cycle too? Kind of a bit of a eh?
Yeah, you know what's really weird is I think the problem was the names that nobody cared about, vol going into the earnings were dirt cheap. Mark and I were banging the table on the Apple stuff, and it was like you could buy Apple volatility for 16% and buy the earnings cycle in April. That was crazy low. And Priceline, I think some of the what we'll just call the momentum favorites, they fully priced in, but at the same time, when the stock is up, I mean, what is it up since the beginning of the year? Since January, it's up what? It's up $150 or something like that. So there's been so much a rally in the momentum favorite names. It's hard to get, the big earnings rally already or the big earnings jump, has already happened in these things. I think that's kind of one of the I think the exception being just Amazon, just because they didn't. The earnings were just not. Amazon's so hard to figure out, but the street didn't like them very much. It hasn't stopped the stock, but yeah.
Another A names. I guess the moral of the story is don't sell the A names or buy the A names, sell everything else, and you did kind of all right this quarter.
I think so, and that's how everybody. They're thinking stocks that were done are not done, and then everything that was great has already had a tremendous run. So it's hard. It's hard to rally on earnings. I think one thing, though, and another reason why you said, a lot of the earnings straddles are met, because actually earnings for the S&P 500 were pretty good overall. I mean, I think part of the market rally is companies are making money. So, however that is, however it gets down to the bottom line of everybody, but, stocks rally on earnings growth. So, and they're given a bit of a multiple right now. Whether that's going to continue, obviously I don't know, but I think the biggest thing is that the earnings were pretty good. They just, how after you've already rallied 20%, even with good earnings, where are you going to go? And I think that was the story. It's a good story, but it's not good if you're buying a lot of, 150 vol and Priceline for the earnings.
Anything on earnings, Uncle Mike, before we mostly, there might be a few other names left to talk about, mostly close the book on this chapter, this cycle, sir?
Well, with the long strangle that I bought on Priceline that I'll be posting on the blog soon.
I knew it. I knew that was you, that 10,000 lot strangle. It had Uncle Mike written all over it.
Nah, not really. Anyway, I have nothing else at this point.
Just wanted to give you a chance to play before we keep on rolling right on into the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody. That funky tune means it's time once again for the Odd Block, the portion of the show where we just go bravely, some may say recklessly, into the heart of the unknown to find some of the weird, the wild, the unpredictable paper that was lighting up the tape today. A little bit more of a challenge today than maybe some other days. So doff your cap to us on this one today, listeners. Because we always find some activity for you. That shows how much effort we put in on your behalf. Going to kick things off here in the realm of FXE. This is the CurrencyShares Euro Trust. If you're not familiar, this one closing about 102, and the orders 3/4 or so, up about 30 cents or about 0.3% on the day. So not a rock'em sock'em underlying day, not a total overall volume day as well. They do about 13,000 contracts a day, almost 14, doing about 16 and change today. So it wasn't total volume that lit it up, but also about 1-to-1 calls over puts. So on the surface, if you were just doing a cursory examination of this one, you would probably pass it by. You'd say, not a heck of a lot going on out there, not to really get me excited. But you would have missed this nugget that we pulled up for you, listeners. Indeed, it goes all the way out to June, so forget the weeklies, forget the Marches and the Aprils, and all the way out to June, middle of the year, where we find our friend here piling in, looks like piling in anyway, to the June 105s. Yes, paper coming in. It's like picking up a block of the June 105s for $1.41, 5,000 times up on the Philly. They marked it as a buy right, so looks like they were buying calls and selling stock, doing about 190,000 shares. So again, roughly delta neutral on that end. So you know if you're buying buying calls, selling stock, you need this thing to pop and do so pretty aggressively by June. Looking here at the open interest, about 3,600 contracts. So this is clearly open in paper. And looking back at the year that was out here in FXE, it had a bit of a range up from about up to about 112 or so, looks like on the upside, and down to right about 100. So it's kind of lurking on the low end of that 52-week range. Our friend here is betting for a move, but again, remember, he's doing this delta neutral, so he's betting on a move pretty much either way. As long as it rocks and socks, he'll be happy. But he wouldn't dismiss an upside move there either. Mr. Rock Lobster, let's kick things off in the land of FXE. What do you think of our friend here doing some calls and stock in FXE?
I looked at this and it seems to me, do you remember what was that, Men's Warehouse? Remember the
yes,
guy
our much maligned Men's Warehouse trade that printed money.
Made like $1 jillion. This is kind of that upside buy right. Remember, you're a market maker and you want a lot of upside leverage, so you'd load up on out of money calls and sell all kinds of stock against them, and then hope that it didn't go hard to borrow or you got hosed somehow in the short. But that was used to be kind of a position, and then back in the days when you got interest, you had rebate. I don't know if they're getting any rebate on this, but it seems like that kind of leverage upside position, but it's leveraged to make money if the underlying moves. And my guess is because you have this kind of French election thing, I don't think there's a lot of vol risk between now and the election. So it looks like I don't know. I think it's a very cheap, from a decay point of view, way to ride whatever might happen with the euro. It's looking like Le Pen is less really likely to make the dent everybody thinks, which is I think why VIX is here. But that it's still out there. But that at least will probably keep the vol from cratering. So it does look like a play to buy leverage. We're channeling the Men's Warehouse guy that had no idea what he was doing, clearly.
He had no idea. He knew just enough to print a whole bunch of money. And
just enough to make a couple $1 million.
So we should all be so ignorant at the end of the day. Ignorance truly is bliss in that scenario. Speaking of ignorance, let's move on to Fez, makers of fine Moroccan headwear everywhere. Yes, huge, dominating the market for Fezes. Of course, this is the Euro Stoxx 50 ETF, ticker symbol FEZ, F-E-Z. We're all over the indices and the index ETFs today here. This one closing 34.19, pretty much unched again, up about a few tenths of a percent. But again, it wasn't the underlying that caught our eye today. This one had a bit of a pop in some volume. See if you can spot it, listeners. You eagle-eared listeners here. About 8,000 contracts a day is their ADV, doing about 93,000 today. So a little bit more. Just a wee bit more, about 696.4 to 1 calls over puts. Yes, 93,000 and change on the calls, 134 on the puts. But those puts were amazing. We're going to break those down for you now. No, of course, we're going all the way out to the calls. They were out in May, all a little bit longer term paper here today. Mr. Rock Lobster catching our eye here was a bit of a funky ratio. Started off, I should say, two-parter. Started off in May, where we saw about 20,000 of the May 19s going up for $1.65. Then the other side of the story was all the way out in the AUG 37s, where it looks like paper sold. So it looks like it was buying 20 and then selling what looked like 60 at the time, 60,000 for 58 cents. Another 10,000 came in after the fact, so a total actually of 70,000 on the day. So again, that's about 20,000 of the May 34s and 70,000 total of the AUG 37s. Now, what makes this interesting on first blush, you look at this and say, wow, there's 40,000 open on the Mays, there's 92,000 open on the AUG. So it seems like perhaps this is closing, but again, there was some volume in this name last week. These ones today are a little bit more troubling. They kind of went up mid-market, as all good executions are, just trying to make it trickier for everyone after the fact to parse it. But looking at the prices of this week versus how it went up last week, it does have the flavor that this could, in fact, be our friend deciding, you know what, I liked it so much last week, I'm going to do it more to the tune of 20,000 by 70,000 additional times. So for the record, he's got 40,000 by 90,000 on it. This is our friend now. So he's doing it pretty much 1 by 2. And then today putting it on with a little bit heavier ratio, about 20,000 by 70,000 more, which is unusual to see someone coming in like that, piling on to that much A, and then B, doing it in that different of a ratio. If that is indeed what, maybe Mr. Rocklaps will have a different counterpoint. Maybe he'll be coming in swinging on this one in a second. Looking back at the year that was here, 52-week view of Fez, and this thing has kind of been all over the map, down to about $28 or so back in June of last year, and hit a recent high up about 35 or close to it back at the end of January. So this thing has had about a 7-handle or so range over the past year. And our friend here piling in with the upside here on the AUGs 37. So it's an interesting strike selection as well. He's kind of coming in tight around that 35 upper bands. Mr. Rock Lobster, a lot of perhaps contrasting signals here. You got the stock chart, you got the open interest. That's what makes UA so fun and so fascinating. How do you fall on these tea leaves, sir? How do you read them?
Because I priced out this trade, and I priced out the trade we posted in UA last week, and it went up for around the same prices. So usually, when you're sniffing that, you're saying, well, it went up around the same prices and more. Usually means they just want to do more. So that's what I thought. Unless they put it on last week, 60,000, 20 by whatever 1,000 times, and they take it off this week, and give up a penny. I guess that could be possible, but that's not it doesn't sound likely to me. So it's a kind of a interesting. I like the ratio calendars like this, these diagonals, 1 by 3. I guess they're going for a crush in the August volatility. This is like, it looks like a straight vol play. You're buying the May, selling August, looking for a crush in the vol and a little move in gamma. And they're actually, the way it's priced is kind of bullish, looking for a little bit of a move up and a vol crush in that August 1 by 3. So they're figuring, you're not going to get an 8% rally in the Fez, but you might get 2 or 3% type rally. So it being a large, it's the kind of the Euro Stoxx 50. So it's sort of their Dow-esque thing. Anyway, that's how the trade, it's kind of long gamma, short Vega. And it looks like something that wants to go bouncing up, and they sold enough premium in case it's an awful yucky thing that they can buy back, the short August calls if they need to, if everything falls apart, and then it's kind of premium neutral. So it's kind of a clever setup. It would need a whole lot of portfolio. You would need margining to do it. But it's on the face of it, it's not a bad setup. If you think the euro is going to rally after this election, it's all just a bunch of pisha. It's definitely a setup too that plays what's happened in our general election and then in the Brexit election, where you had kind of the panicky sell-off and then the bounce. So they're short those August calls. They could buy back on a panicky sell-off when everybody realizes that nothing's going to change, and then they buy up to May and they could possibly get a nice ride back on the thing. So it looks like it's suited for that type of action. So
yeah, it is funky that they're playing with the ratio a little bit. They started off effectively 1/2, and now it looks like a 1/3, if not a little bit more, 1/3.5, given the extra paper coming in here today. But you're right. Your first blush on that is, it's got a lot of naked units to the upside. So if they are super right, it could be a problem. But we also know they get a little bit of wiggle room with those lower strike calls, buying them some upside a little bit. So it's an interesting one. You're right. The nuance here will be how they take it off. And that'll be a fun one to watch. It'll also be fun to watch tomorrow to see if this is indeed additive, or we're all just we're crazy and he decided a penny. I'm taking that penny. I'm getting the heck out of Dodge. I did all this for a penny, baby. These are hard yield times. I don't know if you know that, Mr. Rock Lobster. So you get a penny, you take a penny, baby.
Especially 20,000 times.
Yes, a penny 20,000 times, minus love your broker, and all of a sudden you owe him about 5 pennies. But that's a conversation for another day. All right, let's move on to our final name here. This is Square. We haven't talked a lot about the kind of the mobile payments processing sector that much. Square, obviously a big player out there, ticker symbol SQ. Closing today, $17.93, up about half a buck, or about 3%. On the day. It's a name that does about 4,800 contracts a day today, doing about 19,000 and change. So nice little pop out there. In particular, about 17,000 almost calls, about 2,500 or so puts, 2,400. So about 7-to-1 calls over puts. And what caught our eye after all this nuanced finesse paper that we were just breaking down, looking at what could they possibly be doing out here. Now it's just some straight up call love. In particular, it was the Ape 20s that caught our eye. Starting off, again, this is the smaller names. It started off about 500, block about 500 on the Amex. That first caught our eye, going up for about 30 cents. That seemed a little peculiar. As the day went on, we saw more volume piling in to the tune of nearly 2,000, about 1,900 or so. Also saw about 1,200 of the Ape 19s going up. So between those two, about 3,000 contracts or so. So it seems like there was indeed some upside love. Interestingly enough, also looks like some longer-term paper, the Jan 12-17 perhaps, each of those going up about 1,000 times, maybe a vertical out there in the longer term. So some funky paper going on out here in good old Square. This is a 52-week high for the name. It's worth pointing out, looking here at the chart. So clearly, perhaps this 52-week high sparking a little bit of new upside love, upside vigor here for Square. This thing was trading back in the summertime around, about $8 and change. So they pretty much doubled since that time. They had earnings, I believe, looks like about last week or so. So clearly the earnings and didn't take the bloom off the rose. If anything, it made people perhaps reinvigorated with this name, because they're piling in to all the upside here. Mr. Rock Lobster, take us home on this upside call palooza in Square.
Yes, it's hip to be Square.
You've been sitting on that for about at least 3 or 4 hours. I know that.
I all day. I go Square. I got this is right up Longo's alley. It's hip to be Square.
But we're happy to be stuck with you.
You know what's funny? Something I never thought would happen. Square is trading for a higher price than Twitter.
It's the power of love.
It is. I guess. Jack,
I don't know. I need a new drug after all these puns here. This is just this too much for me.
Are you buried? It's, you know what? It's the premature melting. I tell you, I'm going to go carbon tax next year if we if we get this one more year of this warm winter stuff. I'm going to the mattresses. But anyway.
With that being said, I wish I could just go back in time.
Oh, I was waiting for it. Uncle Mike. See, Huey Lewis. We're learning new things about Uncle Mike today. Pink Floyd and Huey Lewis. You throw Huey Lewis in there, and he's off to the races. Can't stop the man.
I know. Weird black tape Pink Floyd videos. I don't even know what he's talking about.
Kind of scaring me a little bit with that one. I'm not going to
lie. Just Square, they're just buying calls. Let's make it. It is what it is. It's love. It's Square love. It's love. They're just buying calls. So that's all I could see. I mean, buying junk calls. Volatility actually is. I mean, I know it is a payments processing company. The juice is not very expensive, to be honest. I mean, the stock in June was $10, and now it is 18. So, not a lot for people to complain about there. I think it's higher than its IPO price now. I'm not sure, but I think so. So, take your pick. Buying 18 calls, 20 calls, 22 calls in March. What was surprising is when you look at the volume, it's all the cheapy junk, right? It's the 19s, it's the 20s, just all that upside crap. Most of it opening paper, big volume relative to normal volume. It looks like. So what does it trade? It trades 5,000 contracts a day usually. Traded 16,000 calls today. So, I mean, that's the story. People are loving some Square. I got to be careful. They love Square today. At least today.
At least today. I mean, Uncle Mike loving himself some Huey Lewis. Who knew the things we learn today? Got to get him riled up. Just toss out some Huey Lewis, and he's off to the races. And we are off. It's Monday, so it's time for us to head off to the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the Mail Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Mail Block. Like the man said, this is the portion of the show where you guys take the reins with your questions, your comments. Let's dig in first into what the heck you guys were saying on our question. What you determined after much back and forth last week. If you guys recall, we asked you, VIX hit single digits already once under Mr. Trump. How low will it get during the rest of his term? It sparked a heated debate on this very program. Uncle Mike going low, Mr. Rock Lobster saying nay to that. And you guys were apparently were pretty much all over the place as well, because I was pretty split throughout most of the week, and it pretty much ended that way with a slight nod to it won't break 10 again, winning with 29%. Just slightly edging out the number two below 8% with 27%. So our listeners are pretty much all across the board in the tie for third with between 9 and 10 and between 8 and 9 with both 22%. So our listeners are pretty much as split as we were here on the panel as to what the doldrums of Trump's administration will bring from a volatility perspective. We'll keep it on. This one I think we'll save, and we'll refer back to it perhaps in August or some other time of the year when it's notoriously quiet, and see how things are lighting it up. Speaking of how things are lighting it up, we asked you guys today, in light of the big boondoggle, the big screw up last night on the Oscars. How do you screw up Best Picture? How do you give the guy the wrong envelope? It is crazy. Mr. Beatty, not the best look for him and for Price Waterhouse as well. We asked you guys this week, we gave you a question of the week, Oscars edition. And we asked you, hey, Warren Beatty screwed up Best Picture. What's your biggest option screw up? And if you don't like our list, you can always send in your others if you have already. So we gave you the following 4 choices. We said, held on to your shorts too long. That can be read a couple of different ways, but this is the options perspective. Then number 2 is time decay killed me. Number 3, my gamma exploded in my face. And number 4, my Vega snuck up on my delta. Those are 4 choices we gave you guys. Let's start with you, Uncle Mike. What is your favorite of those? And then what do you think is winning our poll?
I'm going to say what's winning the poll is that I held on to the shorts too long. I think that's something that we've all done at some point. For me, probably the biggest bonehead mistakes that I've made is that I've let time decay get to me because it's going to come back. It's going to come back, but it never came back.
It's because you're a degenerate premium buyer, sir. We always knew that about you. And see, there you go. You just proved my point. All these years I've been saying that. Degenerate premium buyer. And now we know for sure. The truth is out there, sir. Mr. Rock Lobster, same question for you. What is your error of choice amongst these? And then what do you think is winning?
My error of choice, I'm usually good at closing my shorts, but every once in a while I do have a gamma explosion, which is not, it happens. So I would say that could be my issue. Or I might tend to the Vega snuck up on my delta. I sometimes buy some Vega a little too early. So it makes me not as delta E as I want it to be. However, I think I will go with, I think I'm going to go with time decay killed me. Maybe, it's like, what is the audience? Half is probably a premium seller, half is a premium buyer. So I'll just say the time decay killed me because people just, they tend to buy calls and they just wait and hold and they die. And that's it. So I'm going to say number 2. My time decay killed me is what everybody's saying.
Interesting. Yeah, I think our audience leans a little bit to the dark side. So I was probably thinking the shorts were going to win. And that seems to be the case. Uncle Mike correct there as well. 43% so far. Again, it's only been up for about an hour. So you got all week to vote. If you haven't, head on over to Add Options. Make your voices heard. With 43% holding on to shorts too long. Number 2, 29%. Time decay killed me. And then a tie for 14%. Some of them are more nuanced errors in there. Gamma exploded in my face, and Vega snuck up on my delta. You got to kind of read those a little bit and kind of figure out how they apply to you. But if you can do that, if you're the harder of the hardcore, then have at it. You got about a few days. You got about till the end of the week to make your voices heard. At Options over there on Twitter to do just that. Oh, we have some people writing in with their own versions, including your buddy there. I know Mr. Meatball's buddy, Tubby. Sox fan Matt. He wrote in to say his biggest error was buying calls in Tesla last week, or just trading calls in Tesla last week. So there you go. That was his Tubby's biggest error. Tubby, a longtime broker over there on the SIBO. I believe he surrendered the Tub badge not too long ago. So a sad day in the SIBO-verse where there is no more Tub running around, running people over with his calls madness. Speaking of calls, we got question here from Gabe Rich. He's got an interesting one. This one I don't think we've ever been asked this specifically about the integrity of the automatic exercise process, or perhaps the reliability therein. He wants to know, hi guys. Well, hello, Gabe. He goes, Don, do you know of any instance where automatic assignment/exercise by the OCC failed? I'm selling a lot of put spreads lately, and I have this nightmare that if the stock drops, let's say a market crush, and my spread ends up big time in the money, it will be assigned the short leg, but not exercised the long leg, thus creating a huge stock position that might be fatal. I just wonder if that ever happened. Something along the lines of a flash crash, but for options, or he calls it a flash crush, but for options. I'm assuming this automatic assignment/exercise process is computerized, and could it be subject to failures? This could be an interesting discussion with your panel of experts with some decades of experience. Thanks, and looking forward for some thoughts. This is an interesting one. Rock Lobster's chomping at the bit at this one, so I was going to go off on this one, but you seem pretty excited. So I'm guessing you have perhaps a tale of woe to share here with our friend Gabe?
Well, let's see. I was trying to, I figured I've traded probably 5 or 6 million option contracts, maybe more, maybe 7 million. I don't know. When I was a liquidity provider, you just, you trade a lot of contracts. But so I'll say one thing about his position. So if you have a spread, number one is whenever you're assigned an option, your risk does not go up. Your risk actually goes down. So if you want to think about that, it might twist your head a little bit. But ultimately, if you're short puts, right, that means, and you get assigned a put, your risk was the same when you had the short put. But now you have the long stock component, right? So if you go through so let's say you're short a put spread, okay? You get assigned the short put, right? So that means you're put the stock. You're now long the stock. But if, again, with synthetic equivalence, that means when you're assigned a put, you actually net gain a call because you now own stock, right? That means if the market went ripping back up again, you're long stock and you're long put in your spread. So actually you just gained a synthetic call. So if you have a spread on and you're assigned, you actually have less risk than you had before. Or what I could rephrase it as, you gain a synthetic call for the way back up, because your put versus your stock is automatically hedged at your inception at the spread price. So you don't actually have a problem. Actually, if some bozo assigns you your put, right, because they freak out and you're still long your put, if the market comes ripping back, you're long puts and long stock, and actually that net position can make you a fortune. You just don't do anything dumb and get rid of the put that you're long until you close your stock price, right? Because as long as you have the pair together of put and stock, you'll be fine. The nightmare positions I have, actually, so what I would say is I don't know of people not being assigned on automatic exercise. It might have happened at some point, but I never heard of it. I have been assigned out of the money options before, to devastating and painful effect. So it's more of a story of you got to be careful of short options that are anywhere near the money, because you can always be assigned. And I believe I got my assignment notice on Saturday morning, because options, technically they stop trading on a Friday, but they expire on a Saturday. So you can get an assignment notice on Friday after the close and be hosed.
Let me guess, an old school post earnings rally or something like that.
It was a biotech where somebody got
even better.
They got the results ahead of time, and I thought, oh wow, I skated on all these puts. I got this massive assignment.
Oh geez.
Like, wait a minute. So they were assigning me stuff that was like $8 out of the money, and by the time Monday rolled around, they were $8 in the money. So,
painful lesson. A painful lesson. But you bring up a good point. This is something worthy of noting, because people have this, the perception of exercise, and in your case, assignment here, as being this profoundly negative experience. As you point out, it can work out in your favor many times. It can also not, which is why we counsel you all the time if you have any concern. In your case, you have a spread, so you should be fine. But if you have any concern about naked shorts, and they're anywhere near coming close to us, being relevant, just take them off. Going into expiration, you don't have to worry about any of this. But yeah, the short answer to your question here, Gabe, is I've never heard in all the year. I'll put this over to the folks at OCC, and they could tell me exactly the nuances. But you're right, it is computerized. And ever since they've shrank that threshold, used to be a nickel, which gave you a little bit more wiggle room. So maybe there might have been a little bit of a question in that period. Maybe is it 4 cents, 5 cents, 6 cents, whatever. Maybe somehow in that time frame when things were a little bit less computerized, maybe it wasn't as reliable. But in these days when it's a penny in the money, I haven't heard of any scenarios, and people complain about that stuff. It probably would have made it my way eventually. I haven't heard of any scenario. I certainly haven't experienced any scenarios where this would be an issue, and certainly not, like Andrew said, when you have a spread. Mr. Uncle Mike, anything here on OCC?
DTA, don't trust anyone. I believe that the OCC does a phenomenal job. I think they really work hard with what they do. It's a great group of people over there. But as a trader, remember, ultimately, it's your money. It's your responsibility. Like we said in the bonehead mistakes earlier in the question, close out your shorts. That's the best way of doing it. If you do get assigned early, the way that Andrew described, the only other thing that I would add to it that you do have to be concerned about is margin call in some way, shape, or form. If you don't look at your account every day, you should, because if all of a sudden you do get assigned early and you don't have the buying power to handle that position, what could happen is the broker could close out, depending on what their policies are. Every broker has different policies. But the broker could just take the liberty to close out the position, because let's say, in theory, you have $600 in your account and you have a spread, a $5 spread on Google, to where it might only be, say, a $400 maintenance requirement. But if all of a sudden you're long Google, you don't have the money to cover that. So have a plan of what you're going to do in case you are assigned early and you don't have the margin to pay for it. So that would be the only thing that I would add on that.
Maybe a future strategy block topic. I guess his answer just keep money in your account. That's pretty easy, but still. still be at least cognizant of those risks is interesting. We got time for a couple more here. We got people still firing off on our poll, giving us their own examples of tales of woe. Maybe we've opened up a can of worms here. That's kind of interesting. We got Slippery Salmon. I like that. Says his biggest option mistake was buying the 70 strike January GoPro options, January 2016, 4 months before China sunk the market. And GoPro's first earnings reports. So, yeah, if you've been following the tale of GoPro, listeners, that hasn't exactly been a good one. And then on top of that, he's referring, of course, to last year, January 2016. A little bit of volatility, a little bit of downside in the market that time as well. So, yeah, I'm guessing on a limb those calls didn't work out for you. We feel your pain, Mr. Slippery Salmon. This is not to mock. This is to share. This is a communal bit of sharing pain here. Speaking of, actually, let's end on a high note, though. This comes in from Game Day Dog. If you guys remember, he wrote in a while ago with some questions. He's got a little bit of love. He says, hey, just had a successful vertical spread, and I wanted to thank you for encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone and try different option strategies. The Iron Condor is next, even though it sounds like a move from an old Kung Fu movie. I like it. And he wrote in, I think, with, I forgot, a hypothetical vertical on a few of the names. I forgot what it was. We encouraged him to get into verticals and kind of explain some of the nuances here. He's writing in here, sends an example in his account here, a screen grab of Viasat Inc., ticker symbol VSAT. I'm not familiar too much with this name. They are, this is a broadband technology company. This guy got a little vertical here. He's got the 6570. It looks like it worked out all right for him. So there you go. See, you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go exotic. You know, we talk about a lot of the fears and the nuances and the things that can come back to bite you and options. And certainly they are out there lurking. But if you keep things simple, keep things within your comfort zone, and you learn and expand your trading over time as your knowledge expands, it can work out well for you, just like our friend here, Mr. Game Day Dog. I believe he's a truck driver. I saw a photo of him floating around with one of our books or something, and he looks like he was a truck driver. So glad he's got time there. Apparently, it's a big audience out there of trading. I was talking to people the other day about movers and truck drivers and shippers and UPS guys who are huge into trading. They love it, and they do it in a lot of their downtime, apparently. So I had no idea. So there we go. Learn a bunch of stuff. Anything there to wrap up here on this love of verticals, Uncle Mike or Rock Lobster?
No love. Plenty of love, but no love on this question.
No love on this one. No love for Mr. Game Day Dog. He's making his first vertical. You got to cheer the guy on. He's moving in the right direction. Well done. And we got to keep on moving in the right direction as well. Into our final segment, it's time for Around the Block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block. Like the name implies, this is the portion of the show where we tell you what we're keeping an eye on for the rest of this week into the weekend. Uncle Mike and the Rock Lobster hinted at a Trump speech coming out, so that's certainly something to keep an eye on. We'll just go to a final check-in here with our earnings name that was popping off at the top of the show. Remember I said they were trading right around 1672 at the time. They had sold up, and then they dropped off to about 1660 or so. Feeling that love again to the upside, trading 1680 right now in the after hours. They closed right around 1632. So they were pricing at about a 70 handle straddle and about 4%, a little more. And so far they moved about 3%. So they're flirting with that level. They got to get to about 1700, about 20 more handles for this thing to break even. But so far, at least, doing a little bit better than it seems. So who knows? Perhaps Priceline will be the one to break the curse, break the A curse here on this year's, or this should say this first cycle of the new year. Let's turn to Uncle Mike. What are you watching for the rest of this week? I should say there are a couple other names popping off. You still are in the earnings. We got Target on Tuesday, got Best Buy on Wednesday, and Costco. It's retail week. So if you're into those retail names, those big box retailers, there you go. A slew of them to pick from this week. All right, Uncle Mike, what else are you watching this week, sir?
Want to see if we can hit 2,400 on the S&P this week. It's the next big major milestone. 21,000 on the Dow. Both of those are in very realistic striking distances. Of course, the Trump speech tomorrow night. Non-farm coming up on Friday. And then oil continues to knock at that $55 resistance level. I want to see if oil can get a breakout from where it's kind of been channeling for a while. So a lot to watch this week, and it should be exciting.
All right, and Mr. Rocklop, to take us home, what are you watching for the rest of the week, sir?
Well, we do have to watch this state of State of the Union, addressing Congress, laying out the economic plan, all of the drama that accompanies the current White House. Hate it or love it, it is a reality show. And I think that's kind of what the market is waiting for. Also, there's some earnings, I think, in Valent this week, which I think is, I don't like necessarily the company. I think it's got kind of a, an issue problem, but holy gosh, it's down 90% and not much has changed except for they're not allowed just to gouge people on drugs anymore. So gouge, charge too much, charge a lot, whatever. But, if it either is the cheapest company in America or it ain't. But I think it's maybe they're on their way back. Let's just say so anyway, that's an earnings that I'm looking at to see if anything interesting comes of it. But it is just cheap, cheap, cheap.
All right, everybody. That music means we've come to the end of another journey through the world of options. A whole bunch of places we visited on today's journey. Got into Priceline, of course. Got into the Dow, flirting with some highs yet again. That Dow, always good for a headline or two, if not else. And then, of course, getting into some unusual activity in FXE and Fez, fine headwear makers, and Square as well. And, of course, your questions about your preferences for Trump VIX, your thoughts on your options errors. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more fun ones of those to talk about on Thursday, as well as the issues with assignment and some fun love with verticals. But before we go, one last time, let's check back in with my cohorts, my partners in crime, to see what they have that may interest you. Let's start with you, Uncle Mike. What's cooking in the land of RCM Wealth? And what if all of our listeners, they're chomping at the bit to work with you? Can you finally accept them, sir?
I'm going to have to give it another couple of weeks, probably. Next week is what I will try and open the doors again next week is what I'm hoping. This week's still a little bit busy. But in the meantime, feel free to email me if you want me to contact you in another week or so. mtosaw@rcmfs.com.
He's too busy for you, listeners. But if you want to bug him, maybe, just maybe in a week or two, he'll bug you back. All right. If you want to bug somebody else, though, feel free to bug the Rock Lobster. He needs it. He needs the distraction. He's weeping at his desk over his lost ice ring. So, Mr. Rock Lobster, people want to bug you. What can they expect over there in the land of the pit?
Well, they can bug us on March 11th. That is our Saturday class. So bug away, and we're going to be talking all things butterfly. Butterfly, butterfly, butterfly.
You going to get any irons in there as well, or just straight up flies?
Oh, no. Well, there will be irons. There'll be irons short-term and mid-term. So you will get your learning on.
Now you got me. Now you got me
not.
interested. Now you piqued my curiosity. Throw a little iron in there, and I'll listen.
A little iron in the fire or fly?
A little both. A little iron in the fly. Not so much the iron condor has never floated my boat. It's just an iron fly for cowards, as our friend Don S. likes to say. All right, check it out over there, optionpit.com, to learn more. That one coming up on March 11th. In the meantime, they got the blog. They got their archive of all sorts of fun webinars. So check that out if you're looking for some fun options content. Of course, hit us up if you haven't visited our site in a while. I know a lot of you guys live out there in the ecosystem. We're always out there on all these third-party providers, your iTunes and your Stitchers and whatnots and Mixlers. But we do have this great site, and we have a lot of content up there throughout the day. So if you just consume our stuff passively, third-party every now and then, check out the old site, theoptionsinsider.com. A lot of great stuff, including not just the radio archives, but we have breaking news from the options market every day. Quite a few unusual activities, most actives. Going to start adding more futures options into their education. A bunch of great content scrolling through the site every day, all day long. Check it out if you haven't been there in a while. Theoptionsinsider.com is the place for you. On behalf of the Rock Lobster and Uncle Mike, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there in the listening audience for downloading, streaming, and subscribing. And of course, for all of you who join us live, we love you guys too. And we'll see you next week, or actually I should say on Thursday, right here on The Option.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.